Guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, September 20th, 2025, and today we're going to be taking a look at Donald Trump's approval rating mapped on a state-by-state basis, with a specific focus on voters from the 2024 presidential election. Now, if you've been watching my videos recently, you might know that I've been covering Donald Trump's swing and ultimate fall in terms of approval amongst a variety of different demographic groups and different regions across the country that have started to sour on the President of the United States for a variety of different issues, ranging from foreign policy to immigration to inflation and the economy. Donald Trump's approval rating is not in a great position. And his net approval, according to The Economist, is down negative 17% on the net, meaning that 17% more Americans view Donald Trump negatively than they do positively. Down 3 points in just 1 week, with just a 39% approval rating, even lower than where he was 8 years ago today in his first term. Now, thinking about Donald Trump's net approval rating, what again this focus is on today's video is on an issue and a state-by-state basis. I made a video yesterday talking about how pretty much the floor was falling out underneath Donald Trump. You found that on inflation, prices, jobs in the economy, guns, immigration, crime, and so on and so forth. Donald Trump's approval rating, which was all in the net positive when he started in office, has now reached a point where it's all in the negative, where his highest points are crime and immigration, two issues that he ran on in 2024, where even then the majority of the nation disapproves of his job at handling those issues in specific. But inflation, prices, and the economy, very, very negative as well. But what we have found is that, on the national stage, when it comes down to all voters and just all respondees, sometimes this could be a poll of registered voters, likely voters, all adults. It just depends on, what they're looking at. But on the net here, you can start to see why Donald Trump is so disapproved of nationwide. For context, he won the last presidential election by 1.5% on the national popular vote. Across the battleground states, roughly a 1.5 different, and Kamala Harris would have been president. And so thinking about that result, translating now to negative 17, a lot is going to have to give. But taking a look at a lot of these states here, I didn't think it would be helpful for us to take a look at a map where Donald Trump was underwater in the overwhelming majority of states. Obviously, that is the case, and that's what the data is telling us, but simultaneously, I don't think there's any true, electability aspect that we can take away in saying that all of a sudden South Dakota might be a competitive state because Donald Trump is unpopular. And so what I actually like about this Economist, map here, the interactive elements of it, is that you can actually switch over from all voters and just all adults to 2024 voters. And then you start to see a much more interesting map. And it is one that, is not as outlandish and as negative for the president, but certainly does show a significant change in support from the last cycle. And today, we're going to put that onto a map and then translate it to an overall electoral map to really just understand what it might look like on the national stage and just what the implications of this are for 2025, 2026, and yes, even 2028. So on your map right now, you have 538 electoral votes. I think this is the best way to visualize it. Obviously, we could just do it state by state, but there is real electoral weight behind Donald Trump's approval rating being positive, being negative in a variety of different states. Now, when he first started off in office, he was approved of in the majority of states. He had won the majority of the states in the last election, and that didn't change between November and January by the time he was inaugurated. In fact, his numbers had improved. But looking at how they are viewed right now, it really isn't all that positive. We can start off by characterizing all of the states that we consider to be safe in the disapproval column. Essentially, the same exact margins that we normally use for our election projections. They're in the description box down below if you're not familiar. But anything where the disapproval net is 15 points or more, we would consider that to be a very strong, disapproved state that's very upset with Donald Trump. So this is states like Washington, Oregon, California, where we're not going to do this for every single state. It would take too much time, but you can see negative 31, negative 25, negative 31, right? So very negative numbers, significantly more negative than that vote split between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and so it is quite interesting. New Mexico, Colorado, Hawaii all joined the bunch there as states that are negative for Donald Trump. It actually is not that surprising. Colorado and New Mexico are two states that Biden won by double digits in 2020. Kamala Harris won Colorado by 11 in 2024, New Mexico by 6. It makes sense that if you're finding a president who was popular at initial and now is down 17 points, it would be states like this that would be the first to go in opposition to the president. Illinois joins the bunch as safe, and then almost the entirety of the Northeast. I mean, you're just going to clobber through New England. Every single state here, including New Hampshire, is on the negative for Trump. So We're going to go ahead and characterize that, make our way all the way up here. They don't do congressional district polling. Otherwise, I would have done that on an individual basis for Maine's second and Maine's first. But here's where we're at. The disapproval numbers are quite negative for Donald Trump. Up in New England, very unpopular. Illinois, I mentioned as well. Voters are not thrilled with the president. But these are all states that Kamala Harris won in the last election. It's no shock that the states that did vote against this president might find themselves even more upset with him than normal. And I think that, again, is what we can just generally take away from 2024, that Donald Trump has not gained or improved his standing in any of the states that Kamala Harris won. In fact, it's significantly, significantly worse. And so when we take a look at this northeastern region, especially states like New York and New Jersey, where Republicans did see about 10, 11-point swings from the last cycle, Donald Trump seems to be single-handedly returning those swings back towards the Democratic Party and really putting in a sour taste in everyone's mouth in the state for Republicans at large because of how he's handling his office. Because voters just don't all of a sudden go from voting for Kamala Harris by 6, then all of a sudden being against you by 17. Because something had to have changed, and we can actually track those numbers as we have been, because things did change. Voters have gotten angrier, more upset, and largely disaffected with the incumbent administration. Now, on the side of states that Donald Trump is largely approved of, there's also quite a few as well. These are states that he won overwhelmingly in the last cycle, like Idaho and Wyoming, and it makes sense that he's popular there. When you take a look, plus 37, plus 36, these again are states that are overwhelmingly conservative, so it would add up that they largely approve of Donald Trump. Idaho, Wyoming, North and South Dakota. Real ones, remember, in 2008, those were both toss-ups in the presidential election. McCain only won them by single digits. I think in the last cycle, North Dakota and South Dakota went by 30 points plus for the GOP. Still largely approve of Donald Trump there. Arkansas, Tennessee, West Virginia, Kentucky, Alabama, all states right now, Oklahoma as well, that largely approve of the job that Donald Trump is doing in their state. And it is interesting because at baseline, Donald Trump should have significantly more states that largely approve of him. When we take a look at this map breakdown and we take a look at, what it looks like electorally, that's again why I didn't even want to try to visualize that map of all voters, because then you lose South Dakota, then you lose Nebraska, then you lose Oklahoma. But amongst last cycle's voters, again, the electorate that chose him and put him in office again, you are finding this collapse in support. So these are the safe states for Trump, the states that are 15 points plus in terms of net approval. Let's see if there are any more. Let's look at some of these states that approve of him, but between 5 to 15 points on the net, which is still, good in the state, would largely suggest that come the next cycle, Republicans would easily win in those states if Trump is, approved of by 10, 11 points, especially those states where we are seeing at 20, 25, 36 points in Wyoming, for instance. And these are states like Utah that border the edge of being more locked in for Trump, but we aren't finding it to the highest degree. So I'm going to characterize all of these just so we can do it. Nebraska is one of them. Indiana joins the bunch. Missouri joins the bunch. When you take a look at a lot of these numbers, you're going to find that the way in which the voting base, in these states voted in 2024, it makes sense as to how they view 2025 and Donald Trump's approval, because you're going to see. Some of these states, Louisiana, might surprise you because Donald Trump won it by double digits. Now it's in that likely column. It's not bad necessarily to the same degree that, we could see the negative numbers like we see on the all voters, where you're going to find that Louisiana shows him in the net negative. But again, adding that factor in where you do the recalled vote and you say, okay, did you vote in 2024 versus are you just angry because you're angry but you don't vote? So it really doesn't matter. This is where you see drastically different changes. But even then, some huge alarm bells being rang for the president of the United States if these are the states that he is dealing with in terms of not having a super strong approval. And so that puts him, at 98 electoral votes. We already, on the very strong disapprove, are at 203. But again, all states that Kamala Harris won. Let's move over into some states that maybe Donald Trump won in the last cycle. We really start to see exactly how this ends up. I think that it actually might be better for us to finish off these lean states for Donald Trump so you can start to see visually, what it looks like, mapping it out. South Carolina, Missouri, Kansas, all states that I don't doubt will vote for Republicans in the future by massive amounts. But seeing the ways in which the voters view Trump in these states is exceptionally important because it will be J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio who's making that case to the American public when he's at +2 in Iowa, which is the case here. When he won the state by 13, how do these Republicans end up spinning it in a way that makes them win the state by 13? Chances are may not be as easy as you think. Now, these are all of the states that Donald Trump is currently approved of in. Missouri, Iowa, Ohio, Kansas, South Carolina, Florida, and Alaska joined the bunch. It really does propel those numbers forward to 179 electoral votes, but many of these states are on the cusp. If Donald Trump is to become, even less popular than he is right now, by 2026, for instance, Florida might have a net negative approval rating of Donald Trump when right now it's +3. Or in Ohio, where right now it's +2, it's very possible that by the time we reach the midterms, those numbers change as well. Iowa's +3. Again, all of these different metric points say that it won't be amazing for Donald Trump in 2026. And we can see exactly why that might be. Now, we're going to steamroll through the remaining negative states. You already know exactly what this looks like electorally speaking. But pretty much it's not good at all. Minnesota's -12, Wisconsin's -11, Michigan's -10, Pennsylvania is -6, Virginia is -12, North Carolina is down by 7, Georgia is down by 8, Nevada is down by 6. You can really start to see exactly how this steamrolls and spirals in favor of Democrats and largely against Donald Trump. He's not even within lean status of any of those states that he won in the last cycle, save Arizona. And that's the problem here, because Arizona and Texas still disapprove of Donald Trump, just not by a massive, massive amount. And it actually makes sense. When you think about the issues that Donald Trump is doing the best in, immigration and crime, it will be states like Texas and Arizona that like that the most. Why? Because on an issue-by-issue basis, the economy was a significantly higher ranked issue in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania than it was in Arizona and Texas. Don't get me wrong, absolutely mattered to the voters, but they are also bordering, the country of Mexico. They are on the southern border. This southern border crisis, the way the RNC had framed it as a Biden administration failure, as a Harris administration failure, these were the ways Republicans were messaging, and it paid off. Nevada flipped for the first time since 2004. Right, Arizona swung back overwhelmingly to Trump. In 2016, he won it by 3.5. In 2024, he won it by 6. Texas, a state Trump won by 9, then by 6, and then in 2024, won by 14. So I'm not shocked that these are the states that are holding out strong. In fact, Nevada is right on that cusp of being the state that might be lean next if Donald Trump improves. But it's still all negative. I think we're trying to grasp for straws here to try to find some explanation that shows it's not as bad for Donald Trump. But very seriously speaking, these are catastrophic numbers, and we knew what happened in the first term. When Trump was unpopular, I remember, and I'm sure many of you guys too, 2017 comes around, New Jersey flips to the Democrats, Virginia, overwhelming advantage for the Democrats. They take, 1/3 seats in the House of Delegates, and they get to a tie, right? And they lose it by a straw poll, but it gets there. They win the governorship, they win the attorney general's race, they win the lieutenant governorship. A year later, Democrats flip 40 seats in the House. They hold on to, they're defending 10 Trump seats in the Senate. They hold on to 7. They lose very few, and they make gains in states like Nevada and Arizona. And it overall negates any type of idea the Republicans did well in 2018. 2019, Trump's approval rating gets worse. Global pandemic hits in 2020, approval rating in the gutter. And Donald Trump loses the election, and Democrats are ushered in, not just the White House, but the United States House and the United States Senate. A trifecta of 16 to a trifecta for the Dems in 2020. If this maintains itself, and this is why I think it's important to look at it on an electoral map perspective, it could very well be the same thing. Because as we take a look at what this looks like, I'm not going to do all the margins, but visually speaking, what the approval rating looks like, how voters view Donald Trump when it comes down to an issue-by-issue basis, is giving us an electoral map that is catastrophic, ultimately, for Donald Trump and the Republican Party going into the next cycle, going into the midterms, going into Virginia, going into New Jersey. These are all things that matter and should be taken into account. Because obviously, we will not have this electoral map. This is not my prediction, and it is just simply taking the approval rating numbers and translating it to a breakdown of Democrat versus Republican. Because I don't believe that Texas is a state that now is suddenly locked in for the Democrats because Donald Trump is unpopular. But what I do think is that it exposes the vulnerability that Donald Trump would not win Texas by the same amount if the election was held today. Because it is the same group of voters that won Donald Trump the election, not all. Map would look very different if that was all. This is an important distinction. In 2024, if Donald Trump, we were to see a redo election, I don't know if this would have been, Texas would be voting blue. Certainly not. But Texas certainly would narrow down. Because a lot of those voters that really believed in Donald Trump this time around feel wronged. Feel as if on the issues that he promised he would do the best on, he is now in fact doing the worst on. Inflation, prices, jobs, and the economy, negative, negative, negative. And taking a look at this map here, the positives aren't too, frequent. You are going to find that they are far and few between, because that is the state of the nation and the state of the way that voters view Donald Trump. So buckle up for the 2025, 2026, 2027, and yes, 2028 elections. A lot of it, believe it or not, for another 4 years will revolve around Donald Trump. And the way in which voters view him now is ultimately catastrophic for the Republican Party, and they will need some serious rebounding in order to do well in these states. But as of right now, Donald Trump negative everywhere, practically every single swing state that he won, including some shockers like Texas. And on the overall national average, negative 17 is not a great place to be whatsoever, significantly worse than where he was on Election Day in 2018, Election Day in 2020, Election Day in 2022, and Election Day in 2024. And if it maintains itself, Democrats could do shockingly well in the 2026 midterms. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2025 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.